You know the story of the dodo bird, right? How it was an extremely stupid bird that couldn't fly, evolved from white-throated rails that flew over from Madagascar, evolved into a flightless subspecies after arriving, became known to sailors as the dodo. Bird got hunted by sailors and went extinct in just 100 years. That's what we all learned in school. But is that really how the dodo bird went extinct? Well, no. That's actually a myth that we created about the dodo bird. And the real reason why it went extinct is actually kind of tragic. Hi, and welcome to this channel. Today we're going to be talking about some theories as to why dodos became such flightless birds. When people first started telling the story of the dodo bird, they liked to embellish it a bit. In fact, the very first written record we have of a dodo bird was in a letter written by a Dutch sailor named Willem who wrote, "We saw there a sort of large fowl which could not fly," which goes by the name of dodo. They are so extremely stupid that the very name denotes a fool. For when our men went to shoot them, they did not attempt to fly away, but merely hopped about and cackled. Now, while his description of the dodo is pretty accurate, he seems to have gotten the part about them being stupid from somebody else, because, well, they aren't actually stupid. They can't fly, sure, but that doesn't mean that they're stupid. In fact, in a journal kept by another Dutch sailor named Arnoldus Montanus, he wrote, "They are not stupid, as some have asserted, nor are they so very slow that you could easily outrun them on foot." For dodos are very swift and can run through the thick undergrowth without swerving from their course or losing their balance. So why are people still saying that dodos were stupid birds? Well, because it makes for a good story. Dodos were flightless, evolved from flying ancestors, were hunted to extinction by humans. Seems like a pretty straightforward story, right? Well, it's also kind of true, but only sort of. For a long time, scientists assumed that dodos evolved from white-throated rails that flew over from Madagascar, where they still live today, where they evolved into the dodo bird. This idea was based on the fact that dodos looked a lot like white-throated rails, and the only other place where you find dodos is on Mauritius, which is close to Madagascar. However, this idea has some holes in it. For one, there are no fossils of dodos on Mauritius. The oldest fossils we have of dodos are about 136,000 years old, and they show us that they had already evolved into a flightless subspecies at this point. This means that if dodos did evolve from white-throated rails, then they would have had to have evolved into a flightless subspecies very quickly after arriving on Mauritius. And second, we have no evidence that white-throated rails ever flew over from Madagascar to Mauritius. So this leaves us with more questions than answers. So what's the real reason why dodos went extinct? Well, we're not 100% sure. After all, this is a scientific mystery. But scientists have come up with a few interesting theories. One is that dodos may have been driven to extinction by a series of natural disasters. Maybe a bunch of hurricanes came through and destroyed all the dodos' habitat. Or maybe a volcano erupted and killed off most of them. But lately, scientists have been leaning toward a different theory, one that's a bit more depressing. This theory says the dodos went extinct because they were outcompeted for resources by another animal introduced to the island, a subspecies of the Indian jungle fowl. These birds would have been more than happy to eat the same food that dodos were eating. And since jungle fowl can fly, they would have been able to get to those resources before the dodo birds could. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any fossils of this subspecies of jungle fowl on Mauritius, so we can't say for sure that they were there at the same time as the dodo bird. But fossil evidence does show us that they arrived on the island sometime before the dodo bird went extinct. So, is this the real reason why dodos went extinct? Well, it's possible. But honestly, we don't know. All we do know is that when humans showed up on the island, they hunted dodos for food and for sport. And ultimately, that's what led to their extinction. But we can't blame sailors entirely. If the dodo bird had been able to fly, it probably wouldn't have been hunted to extinction so quickly. And if it hadn't been hunted to extinction, it probably would still be around today. So, in a way, you could say that the dodo bird's inability to fly is what led to its extinction. So next time you hear someone say that dodos were stupid birds, just remember, they weren't stupid, They were just kind of unlucky. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, you can leave a dislike too. You can check out my other videos here. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to this channel.